What's going on, guys? Gio with Level Up Design here. Thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna go over something that's kind of a big debate in the industry. Depending where you go or depending where you're looking, right? They're gonna kind of either be separate entities or they're gonna overlap. Just depends, I guess, on the needs and contract work and where the actual progress is in the game or the project that they're releasing. So that's the difference between an environment artist and a level designer. So there are, again, big separate things that each one does predominantly compared to the other one. There are things where they kind of just coincide with each other, and sometimes they'll work together on things, or they'll have an environment artist do level designer stuff, or vice versa, level designer will do environment artist stuff.
Dylan! You son of a bitch.
So I'm kind of go over the differences in them, and then I'll kind of put those together as well, and show you what they do sometimes together, or again, the overlap to basically move forward in the game. So let's talk about that. So first off, we're going to talk about what an environment artist is, right? So kind of in the name, right? An environment artist builds out environments. Could be, not necessarily like environments has to be, world, right? Like foliage, rainforest, whatever. Though it does tie into that. An environment artist just builds out the area, like whether it's a single area, like a map, or it could be like the world map, right? Like imagine like a Skyrim type situation. But an environment artist basically focuses more on the visual of it, right? So if, let's say, for example, right, we have a desert map, because I'm working on a desert map now, so I figured I'd talk about it. If we have a desert map and it's in a temple, right, or it's going to be in a market, the environment artist's role is to go in there and build, like, make the textures, make the final assets of said area, right? So they'll go on there, if they need to make a building, they're going to use either pieces that are created by their team or by themselves, to build out that building there. And then once it's built out, they piece it together, or usually they'll use 3D software, like 3ds Max, Maya, Blender, a bunch of other ones. They'll use that, build it in there, and then import it so that boom, it's in the scene. It comes in with all its textures, everything all set up with the materials, and then that's it, right? They'll just go on there and place it, and then they'll repeat that for that whole level. They'll go on to the next part. If it's a certain asset or prop they need, sometimes they'll usually just have like a general like prop list of things that they would have, or the things that they would need. So that as a level designer, which we'll go into that now, is working on the map layout, the environment artist can go on and start working them out, right? Start making those props. So once the level designer is done, they'll go on and do that, right? And that's kind of how it works. So typically, the level designer, he's going to, build out the map itself, the interactions, the objectives, cutscenes, whatever that's given to him. And then the environment artist, once that's done, they'll go on there and do their, their magic, right? Get the flare set up of, the scene. Sometimes they'll do some lighting work too, just depends. But they'll really just bring it to life. And we'll go into now like how a level designer is. So let's go a little more in depth into that. Now we're going to talk about a level designer, right? So that's my role. I understand that a little more thoroughly. But a level designer's role is they are building the area. Again, it could be a map, could be like a certain section of that map. Whatever the case is, they're building out what happens in the world, right? So basically, they're given all the tools from their designers, whether it's combat designers, economy designers, narrative designers, they need cutscenes or whatever. They're given all the tools to build out what happens there, right? So if, all right, point A, player spawns, right? So they spawn in, what's going to happen there? And you have a map projecting all of that. They're going to go from point A to point B, X happens, point B to point C, Y happens, and so on and so forth. And that'll be all mapped out for them. Now, usually once that's done, and they have the whole setup, like the map done, then they'll actually go into visualization, right? They'll go into whatever engine they're using, whether it's an in-house one, Unreal, Unity, whatever the case they're using. CryEngine as well, because I know it's a proprietary for, I forgot exactly which AAA company, but then they'll build out the level. Usually it's very simple. It's called blocking out or gray boxing. White boxing is another term for it too. It's basically the world itself, right? Everything's happening in there, but it's the bare bones, right? It's just gonna be blocks to symbolize, something they hide behind. It will be, like a just square building with walls and windows or whatever to show that there's a building there. Obviously to go into detail in like the GDD or the LDD of what's that building. Is it gonna be a bank? Is it gonna be a hotel, motel, whatever, Holiday Inn? Then they'll keep on doing that for each one. Obviously they'll get certain things they need to set up, right? So a designer will give them, or a programmer will give them a combat, right? Like a combat sequence. They'll walk into this area and it spawns enemies. So when they spawn those enemies, that has to be done in the actual, LDD, GDD, whatever, to show that. And then in the world, it's gonna be, again, just spawn in, boom, they just go on and start fighting basically. And then you move on to the next one, the next area to cutscene. You could just, the level designer could do that themselves. There is some sort of like freehand when it comes to that they'll start building out smaller things, but it's to show, all right, here, if the player teleports from point A to point B, that's happening because it's a zip line, right? So just boom, shows where they're at. And then from there, it'll take them to, when it goes to the environment artist side, maybe the other programmers as well as they're looking at it, they'll know, okay, I know in this part, as an environment artist, there's going to be a zip line. I need to create a zip line. So they'll start building it out as well. So yeah, level designer basically just sets everything up, right? Sets up the whole sequence of what's happening in the level. And then once that's done, right, and they go at full playthrough, right, from A to B, done. It's moving on to the next level, next area, whatever. Now that goes into the environment artist's hands to go and build out, to make it come to life. And then we're also I'm actually going to go into a little more in depth now as to, we know what an environment artist does, right? We know what a level designer does, like where are their roles. Now this is the part where it kind of like just blends in together, right? Depending where you go, it may change, but let's talk about that a little more now. Cool. So now we know what, again, an environment artist does and a level designer does. I kind of just give you an overview, right? Level designer builds out the map, the interactions, the content, the gameplay, combat, economy, sequence, whatever it's going to be. They build that out. Once the level designer does that, then it goes to the environment artist side to flesh out the world, to give it its like final textured assets, props, all the pretty stuff, right? The thing that really brings levels to life in a sense. Now, once everything's done, cool, great, the level's good to go. Now, one thing that is confusing at times is what exactly, like, where is it they meet in the middle? Now, depending on some areas, you might have a level designer role just labeled as a general thing, and you do an environment artist's role, like, right, you're doing both jobs in a sense, and vice versa too. You get hired as an environment artist, your main priority is building out the assets and bringing the world to life, but you are the one who also fleshes out the world, the interactions, the content, the gameplay, whatever is going to happen in that said area, right? So that's one thing that sometimes in the industry it's a little difficult to gauge it, because you will have some bigger companies usually have it separated. So you have a level designer doing level designer stuff, and then an environment artist doing environment artist stuff. Now, what does happen at times, like let's say a level designer, just because I've been through this before. A level designer is meant to build out the world, but they do like you to have some sort of experience or knowledge, right, in some 3D software. Like I said, it could be Blender, 3ds Max, Maya, whatever, because there are going to be times, and usually like in crunch times, like probably like in beta alpha stages of a game, maybe they need to finish something up, or they lack staff, right? They're gonna want you to be able to know, all right, we need you to build out X prop, we need you to build out this big statue that's important to the world. You probably have to go on there and do it, right? And environment artists too, right? Because a lot of their tools and techniques kind of coincide, right? Like composition. I'll explain composition probably in a separate video because it's super thorough. There's a lot that goes into composition, but composition is like balancing out scenes, right? So you don't want to just have, have a coffee here, boom, that in a level, right? You don't want to have just that. That doesn't do anything, doesn't catch the player's attention. They don't get like, mesmerized by it, they're not engaged by it. Usually you have this and you'll have, something in the background to highlight it and, other things to show that. So that's like a part of the composition that both sides need to know, because again, if an environment artist needs to step into more of the level building, the level designer role, they're going to need to know that, and usually they do. So that's one thing I do say seen a lot actually in experience, where there's certain expectations on either role that you would need to fill at times, or sometimes just in the beginning, like if from the get-go that you're going to be doing both the assets and the world building, right? And vice versa too. But it's pretty simple stuff, like kind of just understanding those differences. Now actually putting it in practice, that's a whole different story. But realistically, if you are a good environment artist, you kind of have a decent understanding of how to layer out, interactions and stuff in a level. And typically, as a level designer, it's good to know how environment artists work, and you kind of know how to do most, like some things. You're not going to be a pro. You don't have to be a pro of environment artists and composition, lighting on stuff, unless you want to, obviously. But realistically, just to know some basics of creating some simple stuff does go a long way. But yeah, that's kind of the differences, right? Hopefully, it does kind of separate a little bit. If you're trying to decide, man, I just don't know which one it is, this is definitely the breakdown for you, right? Now you know that if you want more of the artistic side of it, with less like design practices and theories to balancing out and getting levels like laid out and spread out properly, then probably environment artists. If you're not really good artist, artsy stuff, which sometimes I'm not gonna lie, but you do understand the principles of what makes a game fun and engaging as you're playing through it, then probably more of a level designer role. Again, one is more there. Each one has their own each like little niches that make them very different, but overall in the end you do at some point meet in the middle and have certain similarities. But again, appreciate you guys watching. If you haven't done it so already, like the channel, like the video, follow, subscribe. Check me out on Twitch if you ever want to just drop in and hang out. We're there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern. So appreciate you all tuning in, and you have a good rest of your day. Take care.